Gimel. We had done the Mishnah yesterday, but I knew this was going to happen. I figured, all right, we can't just start with that with Gemara, so we're going to reread the Mishnah.
We got a chazer and get
which raises questions. Why we read it the last 2 minutes of yesterday. But okay, let's pick up with the Mishnah on the bottom of the impediment pad. Hareni Nazir l'chiyeli ben. I'll be a Nazir if I have a son. V'nolod lo ben, and he has a son. Harei a Nazir. You're a Nazir. No lo bat tumtum androgynous. If it was a daughter, a tumtum and androgynous. Tumtum is a person whose genitalia is covered up. He's male or female, you don't know which one. He's male or she's female. And androgynous is with both genitalia. So that's a question of halachically, how do we categorize such a person? So Eino Nazir, not a Nazir. So presumably the chiddush here would be that tumtum is, you don't say that that's a suffix. When he says a ben, he means a ben vadai. Im amar chashiyah livlad, if he says when I have a child, afilu nolad lo bas tumtum androgynous harei nazir. Even if it's non-male, if it's a daughter or a tumtum androgynous, you're a nazir. Not much of a chiddush there. He pila ishto eino nazir. If his wife miscarried, he's not a nazir. And here the assumption in the Mishnah seems to be, and I maybe said this a little quickly yesterday, that if his wife miscarried a child that was considered viable, kalulu chadashav, that he had already, he had been full term, and he was considered to be viable, then even though he was not born alive, presumably if the child had been viable and then miscarried, that actually would have been fallen into the category of Yeh Livlad. I don't know why that's the assumption. That seems to be the assumption. You could say that's actually the point of the Tanna Kama, that it's not in that category, but the Gemara is going to assume that the Tanna Kama would concede that it would be in that category, but that the only point of the Tanna Kama is you don't know if the child was viable or not. So that gets to the old question of what do you do if somebody makes Nazir on a condition and you don't know if the condition is met. And the Gemara is going to say that the Tanna Kama assumes that if there's a suffix, if that condition is met, this is the position of Rabbi Yehuda. That person is lo nachis inchi nafshi l'sfeika. That a person basically means when they make a condition, maybe specifically by Nazir, whatever, that unless the condition is definitely met, it's not met. Okay, so therefore the person is not a Nazir.
You see, it was really early on. Everyone would agree he's not a Nazir.
Right, Rabbi. Everybody would, if it really was viable, everybody would agree he is a Nazir.
No, I'm saying it was early on. It wouldn't have been viable.
It was earlier on, then everybody presumably would agree it's not.
That vlad is not a vlad for the purposes of Veilut, though, right? In other words,
no, but again, it is for the purposes of, let's say, Tumat Leda. That would even be after 40 days. So, it's an interesting question what you define as nolad. But you're right, there's a difference between an act of Leda and whether the child is considered to be a ben or a vlad and so on. Rabbi Shimon Omer Yomar. Rabbi Shimon says, no, it's a suffix. So therefore, he's a suffix Nazir. Now, being a suffix Nazir is the worst of both worlds. You have to practice Nazirs, but you have no way of ending it. Because if you're not a Nazir, you can't bring the korbanot. If you are a Nazir, you have to bring the korbanot to end it. So the only way you get out of being a suffix Nazir is you make yourself into a vadai Nazir. And here's what you do. Yomar. Im haya ben kayama hareni Nazir chova. You person should stipulate and say, look, if that child was viable, potentially viable until it was miscarried, then right now I'll do Nazirut, the Nazirut that I'm obligated to because of my earlier condition. V'im lav, but if that was not a viable child, so I don't have an obligatory Nazirus on me right now, Harei Nazir nidava, I accept upon myself now a free will Nazirut. So one way or the other, either because I'm a Nazir because that was considered a child, and if that's not true, then I'm a Nazir because right now I'm accepting Nazirut. Fine. Chad Rav Yalda. Now his wife had a second child. Okay, so according to the Tanna Kama, the first suffix did not count as the satisfying of the Tanai. So now the Tanai is satisfied. So Harei Nazir. You are a Nazir. Now, according to Rabbi Shimon, you don't know because it could be the first child was not a viable, and the first Nazirus you did was free will, and now you're obligated to do. Now your really condition was met, and you're obligated to do a real Nazirut. That's one scenario. The other scenario is you did your obligatory Nazirut earlier, and you don't have an obligation now. So you're once again in this area of suffix Nazir. So again, you have to solve it the same way. So Rabbi Shimon, what did Rabbi Shimon Omer Yomar? You should say, Im Harishon ben Kayam. If the first one is viable, and therefore that was my obligatory Nazirut. Harishon Chovah, the first Nazirut I practiced already was my obligatory one. Rizona Dava. Now I accept a free will one. The im lav, and if the first one was not viable, so what I did back then was just a new Nazirut, Harishon Davad, and the first one was a new freely accepted Nazirut. V'zochavan, this is my obligatory one. Okay, so for each time you have a suffix Nazir, and the way you solve it is you turn it into a Vadai Nazir. Okay, let's take a look at the Gemara. Hi, my lememra. So going on the first line of the Mishnah, he says if I have a son, he has a son, he's a Nazir. Of course. What else? What else would I think? No, mishum seifa. The chiddush is the second part. Ba tumtum vandrogenis eino Nazir. If he's a daughter, a tumtum, if the child is a daughter, a tumtum androgenis, then the person is not a Nazir. Pshita, that's obvious. You said ben. Now I don't think it's obvious. Tumtum might be a ben, just you don't know. But let's see what the Gemara says. Maybe when he says Yeli Ben doesn't mean a son. Ben means something that I will be built by, and it means a child. Okay, or a zera or something like that.
That to me is a bad answer. I would have thought that's what.
I understand. Bad answer to me. Anyway, Kamash Malandalo. We don't interpret it that way. Ben is son. Okay, there's a lot of other words that are available. What?
Biblical language.
But to actually call the child a Ben, right? Is I don't know if you have it. Obviously, Hebrew defaults to the masculine. So if you want to say children, you could say banim, right? Uvanim ein lo or something like that, or you could say uben ein lo. Although anyway, but to say yeli ben, right, as a noun, it's a strange answer. I would have thought the bigger chiddush is the tumtum. Tumtum is a suffix, is either a son or a daughter. You just don't know which one. So, now maybe it's maybe again, if we're going to the Tanakhama that says if you're a suffix Nazir, you're not a Nazir. But who knows what happens if a year later the tumtum, the thing that's covering up, the skin that's covering up the genitalia is removed and it discovers that he is a boy, right? So what do you say? Then you say retroactively you are a Nazir, not a Nazir. That's an interesting question, right? So to me, the tumtum is an interesting question. Anyway, but the Gemara does not answer that, so it does not go there. Okay, if you say if I have a child, then son, daughter, tumtum androgenis, you're a Nazir. So one says pshita, that's also obvious. No. If you say a child, you mean a child that people see as significant, which means basically a son as opposed to a daughter. So where are all of the women in our daf right now? We need somebody playing the role of Rivka to give me a hard time right now. But this is the Gemara. The sad reality is that this is true even till today. When people are able to, besides China, where there's all that, right? Basically they leave their daughters to die so that they can have sons.
India too.
What?
India too. Well, they're selective abortion.
But when people are able to also select use modern technology to select the sex of the child, overwhelmingly people choose to have boys rather than girls. I mean,
actually, not in the United States.
Really?
Yes.
In the United States,
girls are preferred.
Really?
States, yes.
I did not know that. But look, anyway, partly this reflects the societal reality that men have it easier in society than women. Anyway, so I might think that even if you say Vlad in the generic, you mean a son. Kamash Milan, no, you said a child, so you mean a child.
What would you have said if you meant
I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I don't know. Okay, so I understand. It's just to explain why I need.
It's like Baba can't take it. Telling you what it sounds like.
No, because then it's too transparently obvious. So you need to have a little bit of a chiddush. Okay, now we get to what the real chiddush of the Mishnah is, which is the end. If his wife miscarries, he's not a Nazir. Man Ktani law. Who teaches this? Rabbi Yehuda Dekrihu, or Dekeri. It's Rabbi Yehuda about the pile. You might remember the guy says, "I'm a Nazir. If we go to my threshing floor, we find in that pile of wheat 100 core, and then they go and they find that the whole pile had been stolen. So there's no way of knowing was it there or not there, was the condition met or not met. So Rabbi Yehuda says, "Eino Nazir." And the way the Gemara explains his position is that basically, when you say a condition and you don't know if it's met, you would never have wanted to be a Nazir Safek, because that's worse than even being a Nazir Vadai, as we've seen. So therefore, you only meant that the condition should take effect if it was definite, right? If it was doubtful, then you never wanted the Nazir to take effect. The Nazir would only take effect if the condition was definitely met. So here too, even though if the child were considered to be viable when it was miscarried, to have been viable, then you would be a Nazir if we knew that for sure. But if we don't know that for sure, you're definitely not a Nazir. You're not a Safek Nazir. That's Rabbi Yehuda's position. Reb Shimon says you are a Safek Nazir and you have to deal with it. Yomar, you should say, and you make a condition. If that was viable, the miscarried baby, then fetus, then I am a Nazir through that original vow. And if not, I'm accepting Nazir's now. And one way or the other way, you're a definite Nazir now. You bring your korbanot and you'll be done. Rabbi Ava asked Rav Huna, Hareini Nazir l'chashia li ben v'hipila ishto. The guy says, I'll be a Nazir if I have a son, just like the Mishnah, and his wife miscarried, just like the Mishnah. And now we're going to say in a minute we're dealing with Rav Yehuda. Okay, so his wife miscarried. He's definitely not a Nazir. Fine. Then what happens? V'hifish korban. He separated out a korban because, I don't know, he thought, well, who knows? Maybe it was a ben. Maybe or Vlad. Doesn't mean ben or Vlad. Anyway, he separates out a korban. V'chos Rav Yalda. And then, apparently, without getting pregnant again, right, she went ahead. She had twins. And she went ahead, and then she gave birth to a live second child. Okay? So,
Like a few seconds later?
Yeah.
And in between those seconds, he was Makdish and animal.
Yeah, basically.
So
I don't know.
Animal right next to
You and I are saying seconds because we can't imagine any other scenario. Whether the Gemara could have imagined that like a month later, I don't know what the Gemara is imagining. Okay. But anyway, let's, for us, say a few seconds later. Okay. So the question now is, he sanctified the animal after the first time. Now that he's got a second living child, he obviously has to be a Nazir. Okay, but that's right, because if the first one wasn't, the second one, his condition was made, he has to be a Nazir. But the question is, was he a Nazir from the time of the first child? Because if he was only Nazir from the time of the second, the animal wouldn't be sanctified. Right. The animal's only sanctified if you could be makdish it as a korban Nazir, which you can't do if you're not a Nazir. Yeah. Okay, so the question is, we know you're a Nazir, buddy, but what we want to know is, were you a Nazir from the first child? What's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is whether this korban is already sanctified. Well, okay, so just sanctify it again. Play it safe. Okay, but let's say you don't sanctify it again, and I don't know, you use this. Have you done me'ila? Is it usher to use this animal if you haven't, right? So if you were a Nazir from child 1, then the animal is sanctified. If you're only a Nazir from child 2, then the animal isn't sanctified. So the question is, does the birth of child 2, now what's the relevance of child 2? Isn't this exactly the Mishnah? You had a first child, it had miscarried, debate of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon whether you're a Nazir. The question is, does the birth of child 2 as a viable child retroactively make you realize that the first child was viable? You couldn't have, your wife couldn't have had, was. I mean, obviously he's dead now, it was a miscarriage. But it was viable until he died, right? It was considered viable before he died, before the miscarriage, right?
So it sounds funny, it was viable until he died.
Right. Yeah. All of us who are living right now are going to be viable until we die, right? So if the child was considered to be viable until the miscarriage, okay, so then, and maybe we could infer that because the twin was viable. Well, because the basic assumption of viable or not, you're right. Like you could say, who knows? Maybe the first one had a heart defect or something, right? But the basic assumption of viability here is just a question of how developed the child has been. Did he get to a state that he was fully developed? Okay, so maybe that's the better word to use. So could we say that since the second one was born living and clearly fully developed, from that we can learn out that definitely the twin was also in the same state. So now we find out retroactively that child actually was considered fully developed, and you were a Nazir from the first child, and therefore the animal is sanctified. That's the question.
It's
okay?
really not a miscarriage, right? We would say it's a stillbirth.
Stillbirth, yes. Thank you. Actually, that helps
me imagine.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, that's actually the different terms of miscarriage, where the child was not considered kalul chadashav, would be nafil.
So he
right?
peel is used for both. He peel is
no,
I
don't know.
Bothers me here.
You're right.
Because the nafil is like he
right.
peel is the verb.
Right.
So it reads, but really, the reality sounds like it's a stillbirth.
Right. It's like
it's
like being no lot a child who is dead. I mean, that's the question. The question is, right? I think somebody even says this about the language, about whether it's considered a nafil or vlad. So if you want, you could say, that's the question. Is what happened to Hapala and the child a nafil and a miscarriage?
And therefore not valid.
Or is it, and therefore right, or is it basically like a stillbirth and it's basically a case of like nolad mace?
Right, so it teaches you on the second
right,
child.
so and that's like, I think, helpful, exactly that, right? Anyway, but whether it was like nafil versus nolad mate, okay? So that's the question. So we use the word hipila because we don't know, but that's exactly the question. All right. So let's just read a little bit to get the question down, and then take your questions you have. So it says like this. Mahu. Okay. What do we say? According to Rabbi Shimon, mighty bayale. According to Rabbi Shimon, what's your question? We already know that from the first child, the guy was a Suffolk Nazir. Okay, so now you could say, well, maybe this would retroactively make us realize that the child that you were a Vadai Nazir from the first child, right? Maybe that's the question. From the fact that there was a second child, maybe retroactively you say Vadai. So Tosa says, from the fact that the Gemara says there's no question according to Rabbi Shimon, shows that the Gemara is not going to go so far to assume because the second child was born living, that would be enough to say that the first child was Vadai, fully developed. But what we do want, that maybe, I don't know why, we can't say that, but that maybe would
get
be
pregnant over different times, maybe?
I don't know, right. but what it is, but it's all two births from the same pregnancy.
They're sure about that.
Yeah, otherwise it'd be crazy.
But did they have a case of like the Chia twins?
So maybe, meaning the weather, so that's what's not spelled out, same pregnancy, but is it 3 seconds later or 3 days later or 3 weeks later? That I don't know what the Gemara is imagining. Okay, but Tosa says it's clear from the Gemara that it's not imagining that somehow the second living child makes it that the first child would be considered to be Vadai, a Ben Kayama, Vadai, developed. So, but what most of you are saying could at least let us establish that it was like, Suffolk Ben Kayama. Okay, at least enough. So according to Rabbi Shimon, we don't need that. He's already a Suffolk Ben Kayama, and already the guy's a Suffolk Nazir. So I'll leave it to man. I'll leave it to Rabbi Shimon. Mighty Bayale. Hammer Rabbi Shimon. Suffolk Nazir Slachmir. I'll leave it to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Damar Suffolk Nazir Slachel. Normally, if there's a doubt, we just say, okay, it's a doubt. So you're not a Nazir out of doubt. That's what we would normally say. Ma, what would we say here? Here, now it's funny because if Rabbi Yehuda really has a principled position that any doubt you're not a Nazir, then it doesn't matter that there's more evidence to bring. As long as you're not telling me it's 100%. You're not a Nazir. So the Gemara is somehow understanding some interesting middle position here. Like there's enough evidence that shows that the first child really was a Ben Kayama, that should get over Rabbi Yehuda's idea that you can't be a Suffolk Nazir. Maybe it's not 100%, so we won't say, I don't know, that you would, let's say, be Chayev Me'ila if you misuse the Korban, but it's certainly enough to say that we should, that the laws should take effect, okay? So do we say that second child is enough to establish that the first child was a Ben Kayama and that you would be considered to have been a Nazir or at least a Suffolk Nazir, even according to Rabbi Yehuda? That's the question. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, Damar Suffolk Nazir Slahakel, my Kadosh or lo Kadosh? Is the first animal sanctified or not? My nafkamiza, what difference would it make? Would you be allowed to shear it and work it? Do you have to assume it's kadosh? Okay, sure. If you wanted to sanctify it again to be safe or whatever, but you sanctified another, but you don't, and you went and you used it. Or you want to use it? Would you be allowed to? What do you have to assume about the status of the animal? And the Gemara says teku. We don't know. So again, it's a strange Gemara because is it assuming that the second child was born 3 minutes later? Then you would think okay, Vada'd actually show you that the first child was a viable. Now Tosa says, well, if they were fraternal twins and now identical, then even if we're assuming that, let's say, the second child was born 3 minutes later, maybe, and that'd be interesting. I wish we had a doctor in the room who could tell us this. Said maybe, well, you're not that type of doctor. Okay, anyway, maybe says, one egg was fertilized, like semen is viable for 3 days, or so he says maybe one egg was fertilized on day 1 after intercourse, and the next egg was fertilized on day 3 after intercourse. Okay, I don't know if that's possible. Maybe had sex again or something like that. So therefore, maybe there actually is a 2-day difference between these two fraternal twins in the womb. That might be possible. I don't know. So he says if that's possible, maybe the second child that was born viable was the older child, right? Because one of them had been fertilized earlier. So the one that was miscarried, even only if it was miscarried 5 minutes ago, actually was 2 days younger and therefore had not yet reached the age and the development of viability.
But we're dealing with exactly that she gave birth on the 88th cut off,
Yeah, whatever it would be. That's the question. So at least that's okay. I get that it's a very narrow line, but there is some line. So if you imagine that they're not identical twins, maybe there actually is a 2-day difference between their age, and maybe that would have been the difference. So that's interesting for you to do. Like Tosos explains why there's a little bit of a suffix here. But somehow the Gemara assumes that should prove, at least give us a strong sense of confidence that the first child was definitely viable, and maybe that even for Rabbi Yehuda would make him a Nazir. Now, would make him a Vadai Nazir or a Suffolk Nazir? Rabbi Yehuda is not supposed to allow for the possibility of a Suffolk Nazir. So what type of a middle space you have is not fully clear. Yes, Michael.
So according to, I guess, everybody, there's an Ian Baal Tacher for Nazirut, right? Because otherwise, you could say, all right, just wait, to your next kid.
Yeah, I mean, that's true in the Mishnah. According to Rabbi Shimon, why did you have to make it tonight? Why don't you wait? But first of all, who knows? Maybe you'll be waiting your whole life.
Yeah.
It won't
There's certain
necessarily
amounts,
come
not
about.
whatever,
Yeah, that's an interesting. We had
And
that.
what is that?
We had that back in the Darim, whether there was an idea of Baal Ta'achir by Naziris. The Baal Ta'achir, there's two aspects of that. I'd have to go double check. One is that you make a neder to become a Nazir, but you're not a Nazir now. And then there's a question of, is there Baal Ta'achir in actually becoming a Nazir, not being the korbanos of a Nazir, but a neder to become? Then the becoming is the satisfying of that vow. That wouldn't be the case here, because here you said, when my wife has a child, I'll be a Nazir. She didn't have a child, the condition hasn't been met. Right? So that's not why you have to make the condition for it. So the reason you make the condition is because if you are a Nazir now, then you want to end it. You don't want it to go on for 10 years until you're waiting for your wife to have another child. Okay? But there is an interesting question about whether you...
Yeah, then how long would it be? I mean, if Corona, we say 3, regalim kesidra maybe.
Yeah. Okay, but that's not immediately relevant here. Here you have to do it because of what... Yeah, because you have...
Point, where do you see in Tosafot the distinction between identical and fraternal? With tipa him nechaleket l'shtayim?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I read it through my own lens to make sense.
If it means something about the twins, would mean identical twins. If that's what he's talking about at all.
They didn't know about the egg.
No, that's the Havamina that it definitely is a Vlad Kayama. Okay, this is basically saying that it's identical.
Two different.
He doesn't say what the. I don't know where.
Was that the idea?
Yeah, but if you look 3 lines down, he says on the other side, or 2 lines down at the 2 lines of the wide line, the other one side is identical. Then it's a Tosfos Hipila, but 2 lines down in the middle-sized lines at the end, he says, "Dershema miktsas hatipa niklata miyad, umiktsas hatipa shniya lo niklata ad achar shnei yamim o beis yamim." Okay, so that's exactly the question. If it was identical, they're the same age. So the fact that one of them was viable proves that the other was viable. Identical. But maybe they were fraternal, and therefore they're not the same age. So that's exactly what the question is. We don't know. If they were identical, we could assume that it definitely was viable. And if they were fraternal, maybe it wasn't. Maybe the second one wasn't viable. Maybe the second one was 2 days younger than the first one. Okay.
Oh, Shema Mikitzat. Okay,
yeah.
fine.
Okay. All right. So now the Gemara says like this. So we left that as a question mark. Ben Rechumi me Abaye. Ben Rechumi, I don't know where we get him usually, asked from Abaye, Hareini Nazir l'chushieli ben. I am a Nazir when I have a child, a son. V'sham chaver v'amar ve'alai, and it should be on me.
Oh no.
2. Mahu, what do you mean? Adiburei mashma or agufe mashma?
Right, meaning when he has
who has it? Reuven says, I'm a Nazir when I have a son. And Shimon says, and on me.
too.
So what does that mean? When Reuven has a son, you'll be a Nazir, or when you have a son, you'll be a Nazir. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay,
So again, I think you just ask him what he meant.
That's a good question. I mean, you're right. Half this Masechet. Why aren't we asking the guy? Okay, I don't know. Oh, a gufe mashma. Intim solomar gufe mashma. If you say and on me means and when I have a son, Amar hareini Nazir l'chiyeli ben v'shamar chavero v'amar ve'ani mahu. What if he says, rather than he says ve'alai, he says ve'ani, and I. So you would think the same. On me means, if that means when I have a son, and me means when the same thing would be when I have a son. So some reason ve'ani maybe means something else. Mahu. Anafshe kamar doesn't mean when I have a son, like when you say and on me, it means and when I have a son, I'll be a Nazir. Odi mahari kamar. V'chlimna l'cha kivasayich. And you have just told me how much it means to you to have a son. You'll be a Nazir when you have a son. And I care for you so much. I care for you to have a son. And I love your son as much as I love you. And therefore, because I care for you, I'll also be a Nazir. I'll be a Nazir also if you have a son. I really care for you.
Oh, he's not saying Benny and I wish you the same?
No.
Okay.
No. Something like I love you as much as I love it, or the son that isn't born, or somehow the other thing. I love your son as much as I love you, and because I care so much for you, I instead of saying, if you say a lie, it's meaning I'm taking an obligation on me. We step away from you. I'm just saying I'm taking an obligation on me. What obligation are you taking on me? The obligation I'm taking myself is if I have a son, I'll be a Nazir. But if say and I, maybe and I is directed towards and I care for you. and I wanted to help you, and I wanted, not just that I want to do the same. Maybe the I is directed towards, your relationship to the other person.
And therefore,
I'm saying, and I also care for you, and if you have a son, I'll also be a Nazir. Okay, it's a little bit of a chiddush why a lie and a ni would be different. Now, interestingly, on the side there's a different girsa, which is the second version is Hareini Nazir l'chishia l'chaben. So Michael said, "I'll be a Nazir Dov when you have a son," and I say, "And me too." So now it's a good question. Does me too mean I'll also be a Nazir when I have a son? Or does me too mean and I'll be a Nazir when you have a son? Okay. So that's actually a little bit more, in my mind, a little more interesting than a lie versus a me. Okay. So either a lie is a little bit of stepping away from the guy and saying it's on me, which clearly means when I have a son, or might mean when I have a son. But and I might mean and I am with you here, buddy. I'm here for you. Okay, and therefore maybe it means when you have a son.
Where is this other gear sign?
Right here on the right hand margin. You see where it says Samach Aleph Lucha, Svar Machem have Lucha. Okay, or the other version is when Michael says when I have a son and I say and me, it means obviously when I have a son. Everybody Adam Karvi Talatzno. So if I'm saying and me, it means when I have a son. But if he says I'll be an when you have a son and I say and me, so if we say Adam Karvi Talatzno, then it means and when I have a son. Or do we say I'm just doing the mirror image of what Michael did, and I mean when Michael has a son? Okay, so those are interesting questions. Okay, Im Tim Salomar Koba Anfei.
We'll say it's when the first person has a son.
In which case?
Lacha. Who's the lacha going on? Me, you.
Michael, you say, I'll be a Nazir when you don't have a son. And I say, and me. So there's two possibilities. And me, I'll be a Nazir when I have a son. Or and me, and I'll be a Nazir when you, Michael, have a son. There are only two people.
Oh, okay. I thought there were three. I thought you were talking about the other.
No. Oh, no. Okay. Two of us. All right, let's stop being confusing. I'm sorry.
You introduce another person and says, and me too.
You know what? That's thankfully the Gemara doesn't go there. There are two people here. Okay. All right. So the Gemara says like this. Where were we? Anytime you're in the presence, you see, Michael. Actually, I shouldn't say the Gemara doesn't go there because actually he's about to go there. Okay. Anytime you're in the presence of the guy who just spoke, you're embarrassed to somehow not be referred. Wait. Hold on. Let me make sure I got this right. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Yeah, okay. I was confused by Rashi for a moment because Tosos says otherwise. Okay, so Tosos says right. Rashi, Tosos is made better for the Gemara. All right. So if I'm doing it, if Michael here is doing it, and I say and me, okay, then and me. If Michael's around, then I'm embarrassed to say that I'm ignoring Michael and talking about myself. And I said, yeah. And I said, and me in front of your face. V'ani, so I wouldn't, so what obviously v'ani means in Michael's presence is, and I'm here for you, buddy. I care for you. And if you have a son, I'm also going to be a Nazir. Meaning that v'ani is and if you have a son, not if I have a son.
She says the opposite.
I know, that's what was confusing me, but that's what Tosa says. Okay, Ksifa l'cha milsa means if I'm in Michael's presence, I'm embarrassed to ignore Michael. So if Michael says, it's clearly Michael here wants a son. He's making a vow to be a Nazir. So in that case, when I say v'ani means, I don't know, maybe v'alai would be different, but at least v'ani would mean I'm here for you, buddy. And if you have a son, I'm also going to be a Nazir. Okay? So if you say the koba anfe ksifale milsa, that if you're in the guy's presence, you're embarrassed to ignore him, right. And obviously you're talking about you're going to be there for that guy, and you're going to be a Nazir if he has a son. So Amar hareini Nazir l'chia leploni ben. Now there's our third person. Michael says, I'll be a Nazir if Charlie's got a son. Now Charlie is not around here. So I don't feel that I have to make any declaration of loyalty to Charlie. He's not in the room. Okay, so Michael says, I'll be a Nazir if Charlie has a son. And I say, me too. Mahu. Once Charlie isn't in the room and there's no pressure to make any claim of loyalty to him, if I say and me, I mean, and I'll be a Nazir if I have. Okay. Oh, Dioma. Or do we say, or maybe we say, you know what? Michael, you've just expressed such a care for Charlie. So even though I don't have a feeling of a need to express loyalty to Charlie because he's not in the room, I maybe have a need to express loyalty to you. I see how much you care for Charlie. If you care for Charlie that much, that you're ready to be a Nazir when he has a son, I love you so much, Michael, and you mean so much to me that and I see how much you care for Charlie, so I'll also be a Nazir.
Because it's something else.
Okay.
You're also be a Nazir when
Charlie has a son.
It's also when
I
son.
see that Michael cares so much for Charlie, and for Charlie to have a son, that he's prepared to be a Nazir if that's what happens for Charlie. And I care for Michael. Michael's here. I feel a pressure to express my loyalty not to Charlie, but to Michael. So Michael, if you're willing to dedicate yourself so much, I'm in there with you. I'm going to also dedicate myself to being a Nazir.
When I have a son, you could have said.
No, you're not your son. You've had a lot of kids. You're not interested in having more kids. That's not the conversation. So the interesting thing is because the guy, what is fascinating about this is, right, until now, we've had a lot of cases where the Nazir's walking in front of you and you say, Yomi, like you see this phenomenon and you sort of say like, oh, I want to be like that. But here, there's like a dynamic, a different type of a dynamic that is going on, which is like, I want to, not like you're presenting me with a model that, oh, that's a nice idea, I should try that for myself. But actually what's happening here, the way that it's reading, that's in the possibility that I say, and I'll be an Nazir if I have a son. Oh, you gave me a great idea. Let me do the same thing for myself. That's the version of a nafshe kama. But the other version is, and that wasn't like a great idea, but because you're saying that in my presence and I have a relationship with you, I might feel a need to show that I'm like there for you, that I'm moved and I have to show a loyalty to you. So it's not you gave me an idea, but what I'm about to say is to say that I am actually, not moved and inspired. That was the version that I accepted for myself. No, because you've said that, you've expressed such a conviction to this, I feel that it's like there's a pressure on me to say that I have that sense of loyalty and concern for you, that I'm going to be there for you and do the same thing to help you out. So if what you're trying to do is have a son, I'm going to help you out by committing to be a Nazir if you have a son. If what you care about is that Charlie has a son, then I want to help you out and I want to commit to being a Nazir if Charlie has a son, because I see you care so much for Charlie. Okay, so that's a very different type of a dynamic. It's about being with you because I care for you rather than you inspiring me with this idea. All right, and by the way, it is interesting, right? Yes. Oh, you want to say something? Yeah.
Do we say anything about the distinction between somebody saying, is there like saying to Hashem, if you give me this, then I will do this for you, and somebody saying, I just want to do this for you because I want to do it, not because I want something in return?
Right. So, I mean, that's what I was actually going to say, which is that part of the other thing you see in this dynamic is what Tosfos has pointed out before, this whole like deal with God, right? It wasn't said explicitly, but it's a little implicit. Like, why does it show you care for him? Because you're agreeing to be why are you saying I'll be a Nazir if I have a child, if somebody has a child or whatever? Clearly, there's some sense of like, now you could sort of say like, it's not a deal with God. It's somehow I'll be so grateful. It'll be my thanks to God. But but there's a thin line between saying I'll express my thanks this way as like, because I'm promising to express my thanks, I think that'll be leverage that God will actually do it. Right? I do think that that's a subtext here, that there's like a little making a deal with God type of thing. Look, it goes back to the Torah, the first neder in the Torah. Right? That seems to be a classic type of a mode. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I mean, I was just thinking, for all these cases, it may be this was such a reality that that this happened all the time. Like, I'm just putting this in context. I can see like this Mishnah saying for son, yeah, and if all your friends said there'll be a Nazir, you'll be one too. You know what I mean? Like that's what it seems like.
It's true. Yep. Okay. So let's take a look.
It's another take. Bye is take.
Bye. So my ends with a question mark. Thank you. Exactly. Okay. Next Mishnah. Hareini Nazir. I will be a Nazir starting now. Vin Nazir, Kushia Liben. So here, David, here's how you prove that it's not all a deal. Okay, you start by saying I'm going to be a Nazir right now. Regardless whether God gives me a son or not, I'm going to be a Nazir. But you know what? I'll be a Nazir a second time if I have time. So that makes it a little less being about a deal, right? Like, guy's already a big Baal Tzedakah, is giving $10,000 to charity. If I have a child, I'll give another $10,000. It's not like it's all about a deal, right? So that's maybe more framing it as thankfulness than as about a deal.
So
You're already promising
So
to
even
be a
if
Nazir
it's worth
regardless.
that day, still too Nazir?
I don't know. So let's take a look at what the Mishnah says. So you say you're going to be a Nazir, and you'll have a Nazir when you have a child. So you start counting the Nazir that you accepted starting today. Okay, and then you add your son a week later
Before you finish
your first Nazirut. So you first finish the Nazirut you're in the middle of. You do 30 days, and then presumably you bring a korban. You end your first Nazirus. Once your first Nazirus ends, then you're the one of your son, which is hovering and hasn't taken effect yet, because the first one took effect first, so this one can't take effect on top of it. So once you finish your first Nazirus by being a korban, then the second one will.
We don't say your Nazir for 60 days, or just one set of korban.
Right, except just wait a minute. Okay, so now let's say you said Hareini Nazir Chashiyeli Ben Vinazir. You reverse the order. I'll be a Nazir when I have a son, and I'm a Nazir. Now, if you said I'm a Nazir, that will take place after the first Nazirus, then fine. You would just wait till you had a son, and then you do one, and then you do the second one. But actually, since you just said and a Nazir, even though it was your second statement, since you didn't say the time, you mean and a Nazir now. So you're in an interesting situation in which your Nazirus starts now, but it's conceptually the second Nazirus. You right now are starting to practice your second Nazirus before your first, because your first Nazirus hasn't taken effect yet. So that's going to get interesting once your first Nazirus comes on the scene, because you're doing it now, but what you're doing now is your second Nazirus. Okay, Vinazir. So right now you start your second one. Okay, then you have the son. So now your first Nazirus, it's time to do your first Nazirus. Now, because your first is your first, that has to take precedence. You have to put your second one aside.
What does that mean?
I'll tell you in a minute. Pause your second one. Practice your first one. Okay. Then after you do the 30 days for your son, you go back and you make up however many days. So you did 10 days. Your son was born. So then it's okay. It's time to, the first one takes precedence over the second. I now do 30 days for my son. Then I go back and I do 20 days for number one. Now, excellent question. Do I bring korbanot and do I shave? So the Mishnah is very vague on all of this. Tosfos basically says that it's impossible. I mean, the Gemara is sort of implicit about this, but it's all very vague in the Mishnah. It's impossible that you would actually go ahead and shave at the end of the first one, because then how could you just do 20 days? 20 days is not enough for Nazirus. Now you could say, well, maybe you would do a full 30 days afterwards, but that's not what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah says you're mashlim. So if you're only going to do 20 days after, you cannot have shaved at the end of the Ben one, at the end of the Son one.
Right, the first 10 days is suspended. It's not
yes.
college.
So if it was just counting credits towards days and numbers, you could. But since part of the need of 30 days is so it's considered to be Gadel Pera, and you can't end your Nazirus without having achieved Gadel Pera and so on, which raises interesting questions for bald people accepting Nazirus, I understand. But anyway, there's this assumption that you can't, I know, there is this assumption that you cannot shave and then end your Nazirus without being less than 30 days since you shaved. So since the Mishnah makes it clear that you only need 20 days after one of the Ben, so it's saying, according to this approach, basically there's going to be no shaving until you're done with both. And it becomes very bizarre, because what it allows you to say is you get off the hook of having to do two sets of korbanot, right? You basically accepted two Naziruses. Normally, when you accept two Naziruses, one has to end. If I basically say I'm a Nazir and a Nazir, the second one only kicks in after the first one, not after 30 days. If I schlepping it out, I'm waiting to go to the Beis Hamikdash, and it's 2 years since I've been a Nazir. The second one only kicks in after I finish the first one, even 2 years later. You need the first one to end before the second one kicks in. That's normally the logic. Here, because there was this weird setup that you did the second one before the first, and then it became time for the first. And if you were now to go ahead and to shave or whatever, you wouldn't be able, you'd have to start all over again. Somehow there's this idea that you get to do them both you get to do the first without ending the second. Okay. If the logical order was first and then second can't begin until first is over, until you bring the korbanot. But since you did second and then first, you started with the second, So then the first can begin before you've ended the second, because it's first. You don't, right? If the logic was it only comes after, then the first one would have to end. But this is, right, you get the point. If I said 1 and then 2, 2 can't begin until 1 ends. But what you actually started doing was you started practicing 2. Since you started practicing 2, 1 can begin when it's time for 1. Who cares that 2 didn't end? 1 doesn't need 2 to end. 1 is first. Okay, so therefore you're allowed to begin 1 without ending 2. And then because 2, you've already started 2, you're allowed to complete 2 without having ended 1. So what you wind up being able to do is you do a straight 60 days and you bring, the korban at the end. I don't know.
But the Nakamin is became Tameh day 40, right?
Oh, let's not worry with nothing. Let's try to figure this out. Okay, so that's what the Mishnah says. Now, if that weren't confusing enough, okay, I'm going to read ahead because in order to understand the Gemara, and the reason we have all these huge Tosos in this class, the Tosos really explains the next Mishnah. So let's read ahead to the next Mishnah just to give you the full picture, and then we'll flip back. Look at the Mishnah on Tesvav Amud Aleph, and here's what the Mishnah says. Tetvav. Hareini Nazir l'chashili ben v'Nazir me'ayo. I'll be a Nazir when I have a son, and I'm a Nazir starting now for 100 days. Okay, similar to our scenario, except you're in 100-day Nazir. Okay, so you start with your number 2 Nazirut. Okay, you start with your number 2 Nazirut. Your number 2 Nazirut. Okay, it's your number 2 Nazirut because you said the order you said is I'll be a Nazir when I have a son, and then a Nazir 100 days. So because you didn't have a son yet, you started with your number 2 Nazirut. Okay, and then you had a son somewhere here. Okay, then you had a ben. And so now let's take a look. And your ben is going to, then when you're going to do your number 1 Nazirut of 30 days. How many days have you done of your number 2 Nazirut of 100 days? Okay. V'nolog ben ad shivim lo hifsid klum. Up till 70 days, you didn't lose anything. Why? Because you have 70 days. That means you'll have at least 30 days left afterwards. You'll have 30 days left afterwards. So what you get to do here is, because you have 30 days afterwards, the one of the sun will here's your virtual 100 days. Okay, the virtual 100 days goes like this, right? But you had that's the whole 100. Okay, if your son is born somewhere in there, so by the time the 30 days of the sun is over, you're not yet out of number 2. You're still within the 100 days of number 2. You get to double dip. You get to basically say, okay, I shifted to number 1. Now when number 1 is over, I'm still in the time frame of number 2, so I can also consider it like I've been doing number 2 all along. And I don't have to do, and I can do 100 days for both of them.
So if the kid was born on day 71,
if
he's
the
got to
kid was
do a
born
full 30 days after the 100?
If the kid was born there, so I have to shift gears and do this, okay? And now I've done
How many have you done until now?
80 days, okay?
So the kid was born day 80.
Day 80,
Okay.
okay? And then it's like this, okay? So then that gets me outside. So then what does it say? Then it says, La'achar shivim, soser. Now, the language in our Mishnah, soser shivim, Tosfos takes up the word shivim and just says soter.
Yeah.
Basically, what happens here is, because this puts me outside, right? It's considered like, okay, I can't double dip,
Right.
because now I'm outside of my first 100. I can't say I'm still in number 2.
Right.
I'm not still in number 2. I got to finish number 2. And since I got to finish number 2, I can't finish number 2 with only 20 days because ain't lachas pachas mishloshim yom. So I got to finish number 2 with another
full
30 days.
You don't
So
just
soter doesn't mean like
you
knocks
don't just
out
do-
No,
any
it does
entire-
not mean knocks out
you don't
everything,
just
although-
do 10.
That's what it sounds like.
You don't, the
I
20,
know.
the coterminus 20 don't count towards
Well-
the other one. You have to do a full 30.
So there's a question though, because it's not so pasha. It might mean that it's so tear that I don't get to double dip, and maybe I only have to do another 20, another 30. That's all the fun we'll figure out when we get to that Mishnah. So I don't know why I felt necessary to look at this Mishnah now, because Tosfos looks at it, but just to make us appreciate that our case is, there are cases where there are 3 scenarios, okay? Here are the 3 models, right? Model number 1 is you basically have the case of you first do number 1, and then right? You're not, and then you bring you say Harini Nazir, and I'll be Nazir Sheli Ben. So you're the one you started with is your number one. Okay, then you finish that, and then you bring a korban, and then you do your number two. That's the case.
That's easy.
Nazir, that's easy. Nazir and Vin Nazir Keshiyeli Ben.
Yeah, so the Ben is born after the first 30. So.
Well, no, the Ben could be born here. It doesn't matter when the Ben is born. But since
matter.
you were doing number one,
right.
it doesn't get preempted. That's the easy one. The other case, the more interesting cases, is when you said Nazir l'chashiyeh, right? Vin Nazir. So Nazir will have a son and a Nazir. So since you didn't say Nazir then and a Nazir now, you started now. But what you're starting now is number two. And that's interesting because it allows it to be preempted. Okay? So in that case, you start with number two. Here's your Ben. Once you have your Ben, that preempts. And then you do your 30 days. And then you're going to, let's say this was like 20 days. And then you're going to be mashlim another 10. And now you could have said you'll have to do a whole new 30. But because we are somehow saying that, on the one hand, you didn't have to bring a korban here, okay? Here there's a korban, here there's no korban. Because since here it's number one gets to preempt and say, you didn't need number two to finish for number one. Number one is number one. It gets to start when it's ready to start, okay? So you did number one without a korban. And because somehow you were entitled to start the first 20, we're not going to make you do, all we're going to demand is that you finish it. So you don't bring a korban here either, because then you'd have to start the whole thing again. So therefore, you don't bring a korban here, you don't bring a korban here, and you get to just do 10 more, and then you're done. And then that's scenario number two, which is just mashlim. And then category number three is when you actually are, when you actually are not mashlim, but you double dip. And when you double dip, right, that's when you basically accepted 100 days.
What's the Gemara terminology for double dipping?
Yeah, I don't know. You started with your number two. It's 100 days, okay? And then your number one comes here. In that case, you don't even have to be mashlim, right? This was 60, 30, 10. You don't even have to be mashlim. Right here was on pause, but here, if thing ends within the framework of it, you get to double dip. So those three scenarios.
What about the fourth scenario that you drew originally? What about the 80? No,
yeah.
Because I have a question.
I know, but it's not a Mishnah. So can we just hold on to that?
My question is, I wasn't sure how that related because his hair is already long.
Right.
After 80.
Right.
So you said something about his hair. He doesn't have the time for his hair to be long. Which one? The hair for the 30 or for the 80? Following?
Yeah, I do. But can we wait till we do that? Till we get to that Mishnah? All right, let's take a look at our
The way
Gemara.
the Mishnah says double dipping is low heat klum.
Low heap seed clothing. Thank you. There you go. Okay.
Mishnaic phrase for double
You're allowed to double dip. Let's take a look at our Gemara. Okay, so maybe I shouldn't have jumped us ahead there, but it was now we see the scope of this. Couldn't do it. Boy, Rava. We only have 6 minutes now. Rava asked, Amar Hareini Nazir la'achar esrim yom, u'me'achshav me'ah yom. Now, let's say the guy explicitly identified. Here, the point was things were taking effect, but you weren't in control of when they would take effect. You were prepared for having everything taking place now. Let's say you very specifically post-dated it, right? You specifically identified when it would start taking effect. You said, because when you say Ben, you don't know when that's going to be. So you say, Hareini Nazir la'achar esrim yom. I'll be another in 20 days. I'm starting now 100 days. Ma, what do we say? Kaven the halin meya the esrin lo shleimim. So since those 100 days do not end by the time you get to the 20 days, lo chaylin, they shouldn't take effect at all. Odioma came to Islay Gidu Seyar Libasof here, David, getting to your point. Since there'll at least be the growing of the hair after, Chaylin, it takes place. So basically, what's the case? The case is you say, I'm going to be a Nazir after 20 days. Here's your day 1, here's your day 20. You've identified a standard Naziris after 20 days. Call it number 1, because that's the first thing you did. Already Nazir la'achar, and you said, and I'm going to be a Nazir Me'ah Yom. So, you're not going, if you were to start now, you would not be, right? It would not be over by the time that the first one was over. Maybe if it would be over, maybe if this one were to start after 90 days or after 70, but here you'll still have something left to be done after. So, I don't know. Hold on. Anyway, I'm confusing myself. One more time. Let's say. Wait a minute. Since I won't be done, if I were to start now, I'm not going to get a chance to be done by the time this is over, right? So since I'm not going to get a chance to be done, why start now if I can't finish it? Is sort of the idea. Since I'm not going to be able to finish it, and I'm going to have to do days afterwards, okay, maybe we shouldn't even get started now.
Right.
And we should just get started over here.
Right.
Okay.
After 20 days,
Right.
50 days
Right.
later.
Don't start it now if you can't finish it. Or do we say, no, start it now. You'll have this. And you know what? Even afterwards, when you have to finish it afterwards, you're still going to have the opportunity to grow your hair because there's still going to be like another 50 days or something to do. I mean, there's just a question whether that gets in, that presumably would be included in the 100. Would you double dip here? Okay, but since there'll be an opportunity to still do the Gidul Seir after, maybe you actually should be able, start now and then you'll make it up. Now the question is,
you'd have to
the
bring a
only
corbin
reason,
and cut your
the
hair.
reason that we mentioned Gidul Seir suggests. That's why so many key points is missing from this discussion. The fact that we mentioned Gidul Seir suggests that you're bringing a korban here.
Right.
Okay.
You have 50 more
Right.
days to regrow your hair.
Right. So, and you say, well, maybe I should start. And even though I'm going to have to bring a korban, and that'll mean that I'll have to cut my hair. But since there'll be time to regrow the hair, maybe I should start now and be able to at least count like those 20 days. Okay, now how does it exactly fit here? Here I don't have to bring a korban. Here I do have to bring a korban. That's sort of like Tosfos tries to figure out. Somehow, the fact that here I am directly manipulating when everything is going to take effect means that I'm more. Here the reason I didn't bring the korban was because I have to stop this and move to number one because number one was number one, and therefore, it gets priority. But here, I'm arranging the whole thing from the very beginning. I know exactly the way it's going to lay out at the beginning. It's not out of my hands. It's not when am I going to have a child. And since I'm somehow laying it out, that sort of requires that when one is over, you stop that to begin the next
So
one.
we say the same thing, presumably, if your wife was very pregnant about to give birth any day. We say that
Maybe.
birth. My wife gives,
All right, let's just read. I don't know. Let's just read the next line in the Gemara. Okay. Why do you have to ask by 100-day Nazirus? Ask about a small Nazirus. Okay, meaning what would be if you were just to say 100-day Nazirus, or if you were just say a 30-day Nazirus? Do we say don't get started if you can't finish it, or do we say start it, do this, and then finish it? So the Gemara says. Yeah, one question is built on the next question. If you say a small Nazirus, there's only going to be 10 days left. So that you're not going to have the next. There's 20 days left. So you first did 20 days, right? So since you first did 20 days, these last 10 are not going to count by themselves. And since they're not going to count by themselves, you don't want to get the whole thing started all together. So who do you say lo salik lo halin asara? Then vare nazir yom given the islay tamin yomim libsof salikle. So would we say if you said I'm going to do a standard Nazirus, okay, and we would say in the case of a standard Nazirus, we would say what would be the case if you said a standard Nazirus, but you preset the days they took effect? Would we say if you did that, then this case you certainly wouldn't get started. Get started here, you only have 10 days left at the end, and that's not enough, and therefore it's not worth getting started. Fine, that might not be worth getting started because you're only going to have 10 days here at the end, and that's not going to be enough for a full Nazirus. But maybe if you did 100 days, that would be worth getting started because then you would have a significant thing standing by itself at the end. Okay, is that clear? Yeah. All right. So do we say Me'ayom, but maybe Nazir Me'ayom, Kim the Islay Tami Yom Libasof for 100 days Nazirus, that is worth getting started. Salkinlay. Then actually it would go for you because then you would want to, you'll get started and you'll have enough afterwards. Oh, low, or do we not say that? Okay.
No,
What?
is more.
I know. No, but that's going to be what we'll do next. That's the next, and already a new question. All right, getting a little confusing. Now it's all left for Shabbos, where we won't have use of the board.
Is this
Okay.
Gemara just playing with
Prepare the